In this video, I'll be going over the basics of adding rules in ActivityFix. There's a lot to cover here, so I will add chapters in case you want to jump around to a specific topic. To create a rule, go to the menu and select Add Rule, which will take you to the Add Rule page. There are four main sections here. The first one is a name for the rule. This can be anything you want. It's just a way for you to recognize what the rule is. For this example, I'll be creating a rule to mute any short activities, such as warm-ups in Zwift or just a warm-up ride or run before your main activity. The second section is what should be changed. So in this case, as I mentioned, I want to mute the activities if they're short. So you select Update, and you can either scroll through the list to find what it is that you want, or you can type in what you're looking for. So in this case, I'm looking for mute activity, and I'll select that. The third section is the conditions for when it should change. And so in this case, I'm wanting to mute short activities, so I will be looking at distance and muting anything that is less than 3 miles or 5 kilometers. And then the fourth section is what to do if this rule matches. So if you have multiple rules and this is set to no, if this rule matches, then it will stop processing anything that comes after it. And if it's set to yes, it will continue to process your remaining rules. How you choose to use that is up to you and how your rules work. I generally would recommend having this set to yes, unless you have a specific use case where you need it set to no. Finally, before we save the rule, we can go ahead and test it. So we can click Test Rule, and what you do here is enter a link to a Strava activity. I've entered the URL to a short Zwift ride that I did, and if I click Test Rule, you can see that this rule would have matched because the distance was less than 3 miles. It was 2.8. If I put in a longer activity than that and test it, so this one was 43.19 miles, and you can see that the activity did not match my rule because the distance was longer than 3 miles. So now that I know this rule works, I can close the test rule window and click Save Rule. And this pop-up tells me that it was successfully saved, and I can go to the My Rules page to take a look at that rule. Now let's create a rule with multiple updates and multiple conditions to show you how to make something a little bit more complicated. So we go back to the Add Rule page. In this case, I will set up a rule to mark my commute. So we'll start with home to work as the name for the rule. And for the update, we want to mark it as a commute. So we'll click is commute and make sure that that's set. And then I will also change the title of my activity to say home to work. So when I'm adding an additional condition, I can click this plus to add one. And if I make a mistake, I can always use the minus sign to change my mind on that. So for example, if I were to accidentally set activity type and decide I didn't want that, you can click the little trash can to remove that condition. As far as when it should be changed, since I'm looking for my commute, I want to match first on starting location, so I would set this to my home. So I would choose that it's within, and then for select radius and location, I can type in a specific location here if I want to. You can also just click a location on the map to select it, and I can change the radius to something larger or smaller, and you will see the circle size update to indicate where that is. So let's set it within 5,000 feet of this location. And then my ending location, I will do the same thing, so I'll set it to be within 5,000 feet of that location. Once I've done both of those, I can go ahead and test my rule against an activity. And in this case, you can see that both the starting and ending locations matched the points that I set, so the activity has matched that rule. So again, I will save this. And now you can see that we have two rules, the original one that we created for muting short rides, and now my rule to mark my commute. Let's create another rule which uses boolean expressions to do some more advanced matching on conditions. what I'll do is create something to mute activities that I don't want to share with my friend. As before, I will select mute activity from the update, and here I will filter on activity type, and what I'd like to match on is walks and strength training. So I'll add another condition and set the activity type to strength training, or sorry, weight training. Now, by default, as you can see here, all of these are matching with an AND condition. But that's not what I want, because it's impossible for an activity to be both a walk and weight training. So what I will do is select Add Boolean Expression, which creates a new place where you can enter your Boolean expression. And in this case, you also see that each of the conditions now has a letter next to it. So the first one is A, the second one is B, and any other conditions would have other letters. Since I want an OR in this case, I would say A or B, which would mean that it will match on these conditions if it is either a walk or weight training. Now I can test this rule. So first I'll enter a weight training activity, and if I hit test, you can see that it matched because the activity type was weight training, and that was one of the two conditions. And since I'm using Boolean logic with an OR, only one of them needs to match. Now if I enter another activity, so this one is a Zwift ride, and I hit test, you can see that the activity type is virtual ride, which doesn't match either of the two, and so the activity did not match my rule and would not be muted. So now I'm happy with this rule, and I can go ahead and click save. Now we will add one more rule, which uses the ability to enter statistics or data from your activity into any of the text fields. So that would be the title, description, or private notes. Under the what should be changed section, there's a line that says to insert data from your activity, use square brackets and stat name. And then just after that, there is a little link to adding activity data with a list of all of the different fields that you can insert. And there are quite a few of them. I'll use an example from GP Llama's most recent video, which is adding power data into the description. So I will add to description, and I will have my average, max, and normalized power, and then I will enter square brackets, and I want my average power, so I do AVG, and you can see here there's average power, and then I can do another one for max power, and then I can do a third one for normalized power. Since these are power numbers, I want to make sure that I have power data present, otherwise they should not be added. So I will select power data is present. If you'd like to see what the data is going to look like, you can use this preview updates button, which will open up a small sample window to show you what things will look like. Now all of the data here is randomly generated since there is no activity data actually loaded. And so don't worry about the actual numbers, just use this to get an idea of what it looks like. And it will live update, so if I add some additional text here, you can see what that would look like. One important thing to mention is if you wanted to add a new line, you can use \n and then type your new text, which is not a great example here since it was already going to wrap, but we can use another new line to show that that does work. And if you forget about the \n, the last bullet point here tells you how to do that, which says a new line can be inserted with \n. Now that we're happy with how that looks, you can go ahead and save the rule. Now that we've created a few rules, I'd like to talk about the My Rules page. On this page, you can see all the rules that you've created and some options for them. The first thing that you can do is you can toggle process next rule on match from here without having to go back into the add rule page. So if I wanted to, I could turn that on for all of these. Next, you can toggle whether or not the rule is enabled. If I set that to no, it will not process that rule and will instead move to the next one, which is enabled. The next column shows rule order. So your rules are processed in order. So if you want to change the order in which they're processed, you can select and drag a rule to a new location. And now that rule, instead of being first, is third. If you're on a mobile device, sometimes it can be very difficult to scroll the screen instead of accidentally clicking on a rule and dragging it around. So there is a button at the top to change disable drag to reorder. And if you click that, now when you try and drag a rule around, it won't do anything. For every rule, there are also 4 buttons on the right side. The first one is edit, which will take you back to the add rule page, but will already be filled in with all of the information from that rule. So if I click edit, you can see that it just loads the contents of that rule into the add rule page. And now I can make any changes that I need to make. The second one is copy, which is very similar. It will load the contents of that rule into the add rule page, but this time it will create a new rule. So if I were to click save this time, I'm just going to add a 2 onto the end of that. If I were to click save and go to my rules, you can see that now there's an additional home to work 2. Whereas if I were to click edit and change this to home to work 2 and save it, you can see that there's no new rule, it has just updated the one that I had. The third button is share. So if you have a friend who's using ActivityFix and you'd like to share a rule with them, so maybe they have, in this case, the same commute as you, then you can click share and you'll get a link to share with that person, which will copy the rule into their account. If you choose not to share that anymore, there's always the option to stop sharing, which will disable that link and it will no longer do anything. And finally, delete does exactly what it sounds like. It deletes that rule from your account. That covers the basics of creating rules in ActivityFix. There are many other updates and conditions that you can match on. I've only covered a few of them here, so if there's any that you'd like more details on, please let me know in the comments and I'll try to make a video on that. I will be doing future videos on sensors and counters. Those should be coming out soon.